Here at Game Mastering 123, we've given you a lot of numeric rules in the past. The rule of 1, the rule of 2, the rule of 3. Today we're going to give you a final rule to top them all off. For one we're sure that you're going to need in your future. The rule of 7. The rule of 7 says that when you are making multiples of anything, multiple details, multiple things your players should remember, you want to stop when you get to 7. Why 7, you may ask? Well, 7 is a natural number of counting. It's a natural number to recognize things. Anything beyond 7, people's ability to remember starts to quickly taper off. The exact number, according to psychology, is between 3 and 9, with 7 being the most average. Meanwhile, our rule of 3 says you want at least 3 ideas to hammer home a point, make something that's memorable. So, making multiples in numbers that are greater than 3, but less than 7. We create a variety which seems very unique, very different, very varied, while at the same time being memorable. So, keep your ideas into 7 or less. Players will be able to remember every single one just off the top of their head, while still thinking there's a lot of them. So with that in mind, today we're going to go ahead and seeing as we're in the middle of doing some bonus modules on tactics involving a group of goblins called the Black Heart Goblins, we're going to go ahead and make their dungeon and fill it up using the rule of 7. And more importantly, we're going to do it using all the rules we've come up with before. The rule 1, the rule 2, and the rule 3. So, let's get started. So rule 1 says we want one big detail when creating a dungeon. One thing, one item, one concept to hold everything and bring it together. Now that mind, we already have one. It's a dungeon full of goblins. It's a very basic concept, but everything we have should tie back to those goblins. That means all our monsters we're going to create should have a reasonable and a logical reason to be there, and they should be goblin-y or goblin-esque. Okay, that one's done. Rule of 2. What's our rule of 2? Well, our rule of 2 says that when you go on and you start creating details, when you create your second detail, you want to be as contradictory and different from the first as possible. This builds an innate conflict and contrast. In this case, we have our main detail is we have a tunnel full of goblins. Goblin tunnels are twisty and windy. They're narrow. They're small. The goblins are small creatures, and so they're not going to have big tunnels. So our rule 2 is that it wasn't originally a goblin tunnel. It was originally orc tunnels. Actually, natural caves. The orcs carved them into big square tunnels, the kind that they can climb through. As such, those tunnels are built on a military regiment, and they are long and they are strong. There are guard rooms spaced evenly along, and there are peepholes and watch holes. The traps are big, loud, and proud, the kind of things orcs use. Unfortunately, it's not the kind of stuff the goblins use. The goblins are using these tunnels, and they have dug their additional tunnels around them, but these orc tunnels stand in defiance of what the goblins want. They're too big, they're too long, they're too wide. The traps are too heavy for them to use and reset, so a lot of them are out of order and dysfunctional. More importantly, there are a lot of orc-only things in here. For instance, let's say there is a ancient temple in the bottom of the dungeon dedicated to the orc god of darkness. Local orcs call her Ross, and she is dedicated to darkness and silence. The idea that when the orcs all die, they will all die alone. The only thing they can try and do as orcs in order to avoid dying alone is to always stick together. Alright, that's our rule of 2. So now we have a very unique dungeon already coming in context with only 2 details. Twisty, windy, small tunnels filled with goblins that are based around huge, long, straight corridors that are built for something much bigger, much stronger than them. Alright, and that in mind, we're going to combine our rule 3 with our rule 7. What I mean by that, if we're going to create our monsters, we know we want at least 3 ideas to sell a concept. In this case, we're trying to sell the idea of goblin tunnels. So we want all our monsters, or as many monsters as possible, to be based around goblins. A minimum of 3. And when we're adding, we're going to get up to 7, and then we're going to stop. I said we can go beyond that, but the more we go beyond that, the more muddled it gets. In fact, if we can stop somewhere around 5 or 6, it'd be even better. So obviously our first group of monsters we're going to put in there are goblins. Lots of crazy, creepy little goblin guys. My goblins are unique. Our goblins are crazy, chaotic, but also relatively intelligent. In fact, they're very, very clever and tricky, but not too wise. The reason why that is in my dungeons is because my goblins are technically fairies, or they used to be. They were part of the fairy realm. The Fae were driven from the land for a slight they cannot forgive. The goblins remain behind, because many of these goblins have the crazed mentality of a fairy, even if they themselves are not fairies. Okay, what's going to be our second thing? Our rule 2 says we want to make a second detail, make it as opposite as possible. And as opposite as I can think in this situation is probably something that belongs to those orc tunnels. In which case we created that Temple of Darkness. So in that Temple of Darkness, I'm going to put living shadows. They're only in that one room, that one temple, but they're in there. They are dark and they are twisted. Anyone who dares bring light into that room does so at their own risk. As long as someone is willing to walk proudly and boldly into the Temple of Shadows without any light, and to look upon the face of she who cannot be seen, only then will the shadows not strike. Okay, so those are two creatures. We have goblins and we have living shadows. But that's going to be our extremes. Everything else is a fit between those two. Our rule 3 still makes many creatures that are based around goblins, or to sell the idea it's a goblin cave. So what are goblin-like creatures? Top of my head, I can think of things like hobgoblins, goblin spiders, wargs or direwolves like from Tolkien. These are the classic goblin-like creatures I can think of. Now, we didn't use wargs while we're outside out in the wilderness because, let's face it, they would have been very handy during the ambush. So we won't have any wargs in this cave. But we will have goblin spiders, and we will have hobgoblins. But in this case, the hobgoblins is one hobgoblin. No, 3 hobgoblins. Our hobgoblin is going to be King Ironbelly. Ironbelly is a big, fat, lazy hobgoblin. He's convinced the goblins of the Black Heart Cave that he himself is a goblin. And more importantly, he's the master goblin. He's a huge goblin. He is the goblin king. And because my gobbos are kind of crazy, they believe him. He lives among the goblins, fat and lazy, and has them bring him things. And he's here not by choice. He's here because he's running away from the hobgoblins. Ironbelly, he stole from the hobgoblin army, and he's on the run. He's got here, and he's hiding out with the goblins. So far, it's worked out for him, and it's kind of worked out for the gobbos, until now. Now we have adventurers coming down to the caves, and we'll see how that turns out. Well, what were the other hobgoblins? Well, there's 3 more hobgoblins. They're Ironbelly's partners, and they're here for their money. You see, Ironbelly and his partners ran off. Ironbelly actually is one who ran off for the money. Now they're here to collect their pit. Problem is, Ironbelly can't get to the treasure. It's actually behind a large monster, and he's trying to figure out how to get it. And he hasn't told his partners yet that's why he can't give it to them. Instead, they think that he's stalling for time, which he is. Because quite frankly, let's face it, if Ironbelly can get that treasure and get the hell out of here, he will. But until he can, he and his hobgoblin friends are stuck with these goblins that they're living with, trying to convince them that they are important goblin nobles. Alright, let's go for those goblin spiders, for our third critter. So our goblin spiders are giant spiders. In this case, they're large jumping spiders. They range from about the size of a crab, but get up to the size of a small pony, big enough for the goblins to ride on. Unfortunately, the pony-sized ones are rare. There's a few in here, but they're kept in the breeding cave. Otherwise, there are several large spiders, roughly about the size of dogs. The spiders, most of them instinctively recognize the goblins and don't harm them. Why? Because the goblins raised them. The Romans bonded with them. More importantly, the goblins bring them food. Spiders, when they see the goblins, are more likely to pop out and demand food. Any good gobbo knows to have food for the spiders. If he doesn't, he's gonna die. So most of the goblins down here are carrying food for the spiders. Food tends to be giant rats, which are everywhere. Oh, there's number 4, giant rats. Our giant rats are plentiful and kind of smart, actually. They have almost human level intelligence. They can't communicate with language, but they seem to understand words and language, though, and will do their best to both avoid the goblins, the hobgoblins, and giant spiders, which are everywhere. So our giant rats here function primarily as prey. Alright, there's our giant rats. We'll need a couple more and we're done now. Okay, well, we have lots of fauna. Let's add some flora. What's very dungeon that's also very goblin? Ooh, how about a slime? Let's have our goblins know, use, intend a slime as both part of their dungeon and part of their lifestyle. In this case, we're going to have red slime. Red slime, well, it might be a different color, but the goblins, they're colorblind, so they can't tell. So they think it's red. Red slime is intelligent. Red slime is mobile. It normally clings to in puddles and walls and things like that. Grips slowly down, but it's able to sense when things crawl under it. There's no sense things move past it. It's able to drop on those things and try and catch them. Unfortunately, the goblins and the red slime have worked out a deal. The goblins understand red slime. They know how to use it. Once again, food. Food is a big thing for the red slime. The goblins know that they can easily distract the red slime by giving it food. They also know what can burn and cannot burn. As such, they are able to handle it and utilize it. They keep the red slime primarily in pits and buckets. In goblin caves, falling into a pit isn't just falling 10 feet and taking some damage. It's falling 10 feet and taking some damage while you fall into a pile of red slime. Goblins, they also use as a weapon. Goblins have figured out how to put bits of red slime into bottles with little bits of meat. Once they get enough red slime in, they'll close it up and feed it just a little more meat before sealing it off. With that, have a bottle full of red slime they can throw at someone. Red slime bombs. Disgusting, and a nice little booby trap and trick to use against your players. Alright, right now we got a pretty good goblin ecology. I mentioned there would be a monster that was guarding that treasure. And I think I got it. Remember I told you earlier that our goblins were fairies, so I have one more common monster which is fairly related to my dungeons. That's trolls. According to the fairies, they used to be unliving objects, rocks and statues and that sort of thing. But supposedly a fairy king, in his delusions, thought the rocks were living and real, and demanded them to start performing tasks, delivering messages and stuff like that. Well, this is the Feywild, so slowly over time, those bits of living earth became real. They turned into trolls, immortal, unfeeling creatures that live deep, darkened caves in the earth, serving the whims and will of the fairy king. Creatures that cannot be killed unless, one, they meet their elemental enemy, fire. Fire can burn a troll to death and destroy it forever. But because we like Tolkien, we're going to add sunlight. Ooh, no, let's make that better. The truth. Our trolls are vulnerable to the truth. Fairies lie. Fairies are crazy. Fairies are kind of insane. And seeing as our trolls are part fae, and they are technically unliving rocks, if they are ever confronted with the truth, they will once again turn to rocks. A couple things can do this. One, sunlight. Taking them out into the light of day will force them to see the sun for the first time and remember they are rocks, and they will turn back to stone. Two, a mirror. If you can show a troll its mirror image, they will, once again, realize that it's a rock. It'll see the truth, and it will turn back into a rock. And three, well, being damn convincing. A proper debate, a proper discussion, if one can talk to a troll long enough and convince it's a rock, it will believe it's a rock. Now be aware, my trolls are wickedly smart and wickedly cruel, and they're immortal. That said, they can be killed with sunlight, mirrors, or just a clever word game. That said, I hope your players have good knowledge skills to know these things, because if they're going off what's in the DMG, they're going to have trouble with my trolls. And if you want to use my trolls, just call them fairy trolls or fae trolls, and make the difficulty to recognize who and what they are very difficult. In any case, why we have our troll here? Well, our troll here is on a mission from the Fairy King, and so he came here, of all things, to see that statue down below. When he got here, he found the place full of goblins, and he was angry. He hates goblins, and goblins kind of hate him. They're both fairies, and they recognize each other, and they understand each other. At the same time, he's a creature of order, and they're creatures of nonsense. And a massive fight broke out. The troll swamped his way through. heading down to talk to the statue, so he can basically deliver a message to the Queen of Darkness. And then Iron Belly stepped in. Iron Belly, who was being held at the time by the goblins at ransom, the goblins who were about ready to steal Iron Belly's treasure and execute him because they thought he was just some kind of weird-ass goblin. Iron Belly convinced the goblins that he was a goblin king and he could take care of the troll. With that, Iron Belly engaged in what could be described as the most humorous combat there was, mostly involving annoying the troll and running for his life. In the process, though, he managed to trick the troll into falling into a large pit. The troll's stuck down there and can't get out. But now Iron Belly's kind of stuck because that's where the goblins hid his treasure. The troll sits there, down the bottom of the pit, immortal, unable to die, annoyed that there's goblins overhead. Iron Belly wants the troll dead, but he can't figure out how to kill it. He's not that smart. But he's convinced the goblins that he's their king and that the troll is now guarding his treasure. Meanwhile, the troll tries to convince them of the difference. He tries to tell them the truth. But they're goblins, and so they get easily confused sometimes. So instead, the troll sits down the bottom of that pit, waiting all day, singing and trying to convince anyone who comes by to talk to him and let him out. So far, the only ones who've listened to him, the only ones that have heard his words, are giant rats. The giant rats hear him singing. They come by, sometimes in large groups. They listen to him. Sometimes they even do little dances. He's almost amused by it, but really wants them to find a way to get him out of here. So instead, he sits down there, him singing, and the rats dancing to it. And that's our Black Heart Dungeon, a twisty, winding goblin caves built on top of a old regimented orc fortress. A temple of darkness in the bottom dedicated to an ancient orc goddess, filled with living shadows that will attack anyone who dares bring light into their realm. Angry and tired old trolls trapped in a cave, sitting on top of a treasure pile, unable to get out of that cave. Meanwhile, a cavern full of crafty, twisty, crazy little goblins, ruled by an overworked and overwhelmed hobgoblin that absolutely hates them and wants to get out of here. But he has his partners looking over his shoulder, a troll standing between him and the treasure, and these crazy goblins and their red slime and their dancing spiders all over the place. And that's our Black Heart Dungeon, a very distinct and unique place. When players run into this Black Heart Dungeon and these themes come together in a coherent concept, they'll remember this place. They'll remember that old troll sitting on top of the treasure pile, waiting for anyone to get him out. They'll remember these crazy goblins and their hobgoblin ruler, one who absolutely hates them, and vice versa. They'll remember red slime bombs being tossed at them and red slime being in every pit, crevice, and bucket. They'll remember the poor little rats running back and forth between everybody trying to stay alive when they themselves are only food. Their only protector and savior, a giant troll sitting at the bottom of a pit. And they'll remember those dancing spiders. Creepy, crawling little spiders hiding everywhere the red slime doesn't, waiting for any kind of prey. Sometimes coming down in large groups down tunnels, or sometimes being driven by a goblin master. Point is, we only have over half a dozen monsters here, and we have a very distinct and unique dungeon. Players will remember this place, and they won't have any trouble remembering any of the creatures that are here. Even if they forget one or two, they'll remember the majority, which means your Black Heart Goblin Dungeon is going to stand out. That's rule 7. Whenever you start making multiples of anything, whether it's gods, countries, NPCs, nobles, religions, whatever it is, you want to get over 3, but once you get to about 7, you want to stop. Being aware that anything over that is going to be mostly forgotten. Some players can remember up to 9, and some will way up to 5. So stick to 7 if you can. And with that, we're done for now. Until next time, good luck and good gaming.